Let us settle into a moment of quiet, not the quiet of the outer world, which may still rustle and move about us, but the quiet that exists within us, even now, before a word is spoken, before a thought is formed. There is this presence. It is not something we create, nor something we summon. It is the very life of our being, the breath behind our breathing, the awareness through which we are conscious of anything at all. If we allow ourselves, just for this moment, to turn gently inward, we will discover that this presence is here already. We have not traveled to it. We have not called it forth. We have only removed our attention from the noise of the world long enough to notice what has always been in the spirit of inner rest. Let us begin. Today we are taking up a subject that has captured the imagination of many earnest seekers. The world has become fascinated by the idea that somewhere within the human body lies a mystical organ capable of opening the door to spiritual illumination, the pineal gland, the so-called third eye. Books are written about it, techniques are offered to stimulate it, and entire systems of practice have been built upon this hope that by awakening something within the brain, one might awaken something of God. We do not criticize such seeking. No soul turns its face toward God except by grace. Every search, however imperfect, is part of that divine impulse moving within the individual. And so we honor the sincerity that lies beneath these pursuits. But sincerity alone does not reveal truth. And for those who would walk the spiritual path in its purity, it becomes necessary to pause, to be still, and to ask, what is it that we are truly seeking, and where is it to be found? For this is the foundation of all spiritual unfolding, to know where truth resides. If God were to be found in the body, then those with healthy bodies would be nearer to him, and those with infirm bodies would be further away if God were reached through the pineal gland. Then infants, whose bodies are not yet fully developed, would be without him, and the aged, whose faculties have slowed, would be deprived of his presence. But this cannot be, for God is not dependent upon time, nor age, nor physiology. God is not bound by matter, nor does spirit await the cooperation of flesh in order to reveal itself. Let us, therefore, begin with this simple, gentle recognition. Whatever God is now. Whatever truth is present. Whatever Christ consciousness may be, it is not something that must be manufactured, stimulated, opened, or achieved. It is the very essence of our being made evident as we turn away from the belief that we are separate from that which formed us. And so today, as we speak of these things, let us not fall into the temptation of judging the world's approach, nor of condemning the practices others find meaningful. Let us simply stand still within ourselves and allow the truth to reveal itself. We are not here to study anatomy. We are not here to investigate the properties of a gland. We are here to rest in the awareness that the kingdom of God is within us, not within the skull, not within an organ, but within consciousness itself. We begin, then, not with excitement, not with curiosity, not with the desire to acquire something new, but with peace, for only in peace can the Spirit of God be discerned. And only in stillness can we hear the gentle voice that says, I am here, I always have been. Let this first recognition set the tone for all that follows. We are not seeking to reach God. We are allowing God to reveal himself as the very presence within us. When this is understood deeply, quietly, without strain, it becomes clear why the fascination with the pineal gland, or with any physical channel, cannot be the way into Christ consciousness, for Christ is not a function of the body. Christ is the realization of the infinite, invisible, appearing as individual being, and that realization comes not by effort, but by grace, and by the simple surrender to the presence already here. Let us hold now a moment of inner silence, not to achieve anything, but simply to acknowledge that all spiritual exploration begins in this stillness. And now we may proceed. Let us continue now in the same spirit of quiet recognition, for all true spiritual instruction unfolds from an inner center, not from the intellect. And as we turn our attention gently toward today's subject, let us keep before us this single truth. The presence of God is the only teacher, the only authority, the only life revealing itself. In recent years, there has arisen in the world a tremendous fascination with the pineal gland. People speak of it as the third eye, the gateway to higher realms, the hidden spiritual organ that, once activated, will lift an individual into enlightenment. There are teachings, exercises, diets, techniques promising that if one can but stimulate this tiny gland, one may suddenly perceive light, truth, and divinity. We acknowledge that all this arises from a sincere longing for spiritual awakening. The human mind, recognizing that something greater than itself exists, begins searching for a means to touch it. And so, believing that the infinite must somehow meet the finite, it looks for a bridge, something physical, something located, something accessible to the senses. It says, if God is invisible, then perhaps there is an organ that can perceive him. It believes, if I awaken this mysterious gland, I may awaken the soul, and so the search turns toward the body. But we must pause here, for the spiritual path is a path of discernment, and we must gently ask, is it possible that the infinite God awaits the stimulation of a piece of physical matter before revealing himself, spirit, which is boundless and eternal, cannot be confined within the limits of a gland no larger than a grain of rice? The infinite invisible is not governed by chemical reactions, nor does it require an organ to express itself. If God depended upon the pineal gland, then those whose glands are damaged, underdeveloped, or removed would be forever barred from the kingdom. And yet we know this cannot be so. For the kingdom of God is infinite, impartial, universal, and present as the very life of each soul regardless of physical condition. No, the fascination with the pineal gland arises not because the gland is divine, but because humanity has not yet understood where the divine resides. Spiritual seekers long to break through the veil of material sense, and in their longing, they reach for whatever symbol they believe might ease the journey. But the very act of reaching outward becomes the barrier, for God is not found in stimulation, nor in techniques, nor in the manipulation of the body. God is found in consciousness, in the silent inner recognition of the presence that has never been absent. There have always been movements in the world that look to the body for spiritual awakening. Some have looked to breathing, others to posture, others to diet, others to energy centers or waves or vibrations. And yet throughout all history, the great mystics, those who truly pierced the veil, spoke of something entirely different. They spoke of stillness, of surrender, of contemplation, of the gentle realization that God is already here and requires no human effort to be made present. the body may serve as a symbol, a reminder that something deeper seeks expression, but it is only a symbol. And when the symbol becomes the pursuit, the reality is forgotten. Let us take care, therefore, not to ridicule those who look to the pineal gland, for they seek the same truth we seek, but we must not follow the world's pattern of seeking truth in matter, nor must we believe that the invisible can be reached through the visible. All attempts to find God through the body lead us outward, and all true spiritual realization requires us to turn inward. The pineal gland may have a function in the human experience, but it is not the source of illumination. It is not the door to the infinite. It does not bestow Christ consciousness. If it plays any role at all, it is simply a servant to consciousness. Just as the eyes serve vision but do not create light, Christ consciousness does not descend because a gland awakens. Rather, the gland reflects whatever consciousness is already realized, for consciousness is cause, and the body is effect, and effect cannot lead us to cause. Let us therefore be still and recognize. The presence we seek is not hidden in the skull. It does not rest in tissue or chemistry. It is not awaiting activation. It is here, now, as the life of our being. With this understanding, we can move forward not in judgment, not in dismissal, but in clarity. For if we wish to understand why the world searches for God in matter, we must first understand what Christ consciousness truly is. And so, let us proceed to the next step. Let us move now into a deeper silence, not the silence of stopping sound, but the silence of releasing all human attempts to define the infinite. For as long as we try to grasp God with the intellect, we will continue searching among forms, organs, techniques, and symbols. But when we release the mind from its effort, when we become still and receptive, the truth begins to reveal itself. Christ consciousness is not a higher form of human consciousness. It is not the mind made more perceptive, not the intellect made sharper, not the emotions made more refined. It is not a psychological condition, nor is it an energetic frequency that may be generated or sustained by human effort. Christ consciousness is the activity of God realized within individual awareness. Let us say that again. Softly and with great reverence, Christ consciousness is the activity of God realized within you. It is not something you become. It is something you recognize. It is not something you attain. It is something you uncover. It is not the evolution of a human self. It is the unveiling of the divine self. For Christ is not a person. Christ is not Jesus the man. Christ is the divine nature that Jesus revealed. Christ is God expressing his individual consciousness. This is why Jesus could say, "I can of mine own self do nothing." In that statement, he revealed the very essence of Christ consciousness, the absence of a personal self, and the presence of the infinite self. When Jesus healed, he did not manipulate energy. He did not activate glands. He did not adjust the physical structure of the body. He simply recognized the perfection of God where the human eye saw imperfection. That recognition, not a technique, not a power, not a manipulation, was the healing. So what then is Christ consciousness? It is the awareness that God is the only life, God the only mind, God the only substance, God the only presence, God the only self. It is the realization that there is no life separate from God, that must be fixed, improved, opened, or awakened. It is the recognition that the life you call your life is in reality the life of God, expressing as individual being. This is why the search for Christ consciousness through the pineal gland or any bodily organ cannot succeed. It begins with the belief that I, the human, must awaken. Yet Christ consciousness dawns only when this belief is surrendered, and we see that the human self has never been the self at all. Christ consciousness is the recognition that the personal I is not the real identity. The eternal I, God, is the identity. As long as one believes Christ consciousness is something to obtain, it cannot be realized. For the moment we attempt to obtain it, we place ourselves outside of it. The very act of seeking becomes the veil. In the quiet of inner listening, however, something subtle occurs, a shift not of the body, not of the mind, but of awareness, a soft unveiling, a gentle realization that the presence we have sought is the presence that has been living us all along. In that recognition, in that sacred moment, Christ is realized not as something added, but as something revealed. Christ consciousness is not an achievement, it is a revelation. It is God recognizing God through the transparency of the individual soul. This is why Jesus said, "The Father and I are one," not as two beings, but as one. Life appearing in two aspects, invisible as God, visible as the Christ idea unfolding through the individual. When we speak of Christ consciousness, then we do not speak of a gland awakening, nor of a body glowing, nor of psychic sight opening. We speak of the dissolution of the sense of separation and the emergence of the truth that God is the only being in expression. This realization cannot be forced. It cannot be made to happen. It cannot be accelerated by physical methods. It comes as grace when the human self grows quiet enough, humble enough, receptive enough to let God be God. And so, as we continue, let us not think of Christ as something to reach, but as something we already are, awaiting only our recognition. Now, having seen what Christ consciousness truly is, we are ready to understand why the human body, though sacred, though meaningful, can never be its source. Let us move gently into that understanding. Let us go on now, but let us go on softly, without haste, without the sense that we are gathering knowledge. For on this path we are not accumulating ideas, we are surrendering them. And as we surrender the false concepts we have carried about God, about ourselves, and about the body, we make room for a deeper revelation to unfold. We have seen that Christ consciousness is not a product of the human mind, nor an activity of the physical organism. Now we must understand the place of the body in the spiritual life, for though the body is not the source of illumination, neither is it to be despised. It plays a role, but not the role the world imagines. The world believes the body is the center of life. It believes consciousness lives in the brain. It believes spirit must somehow function through glands, nerves, tissues, and energy centers, but the mystic knows the opposite. The body is the instrument of consciousness, not the source of it. The body is a temple not because it houses God, but because it expresses the harmony of the presence that is God. A temple is sacred not in itself, but in what it reveals, and so the body becomes holy not because it contains spirit, but because spirit animates it. Yet the temple cannot reveal the infinite. If we mistake the temple for the spirit, it reflects. This is the era of those who search for God in the pineal gland, or in the nervous system, or in some structure of the brain. They mistake the instrument for the musician, the brushstroke for the artist, the ray of light for the sun that sent it forth. The body, beautiful though it may be, is effect. Spirit is cause, and cause never depends on effect for its functioning. You may look at your eyes, but they do not create vision. You may look at your ears, but they do not create sound. You may look at your brain, but it does not create thought. The eyes receive light, they do not originate it. The ears receive vibration, they do not produce it. The brain receives impressions, it does not produce consciousness. And so the pineal gland, whatever its physical function may be, is not the source of illumination. It may reflect a state of awareness, just as a lens reflects the light that passes through it, but the lens is not the light. If you understand this, you are already standing upon the threshold of mystical realization. For the moment you stop looking to the body for spiritual awakening, you shift your attention from the outer to the inner, from the visible to the invisible, from effects to cause. And in that shift, a great burden falls away. No longer must you cleanse, correct, activate, or stimulate the body in order to reach God. No longer are you bound by the limitations of flesh. No longer do you depend upon the anatomy for the revelation of the Spirit. The body becomes what it was always meant to be, a servant, not a master, an instrument through which the music of the infinite may be heard. Let us understand, then, that our spiritual progress does not depend upon the condition of the body. It does not matter whether the body is strong or frail, young or old, active or still. The Christ does not grow brighter because the body is healthy, nor does it dim because the body is weak. The Christ is the light behind all forms, the reality behind all appearances. It is for this reason that great illumination has come to men and women whose bodies were infirm, whose eyes were blind, whose nerves were failing, whose organs were weak. For the revelation does not depend upon the temple, it depends upon the presence that fills the temple. As long as we believe that the body can bring us closer to God, we remain in the realm of effect. But when we see the body as the outward expression of an inward life, we turn to the source, and the source reveals itself. Let us rest, then, in this gentle recognition. The body is not to be worshipped, nor feared, nor manipulated into spirituality. The body is to be understood as the temple through which God expresses, but never the place where God is found. To seek God in the body is to seek the sun in the reflection on the water. Look to the water, and the reflection dances. Look to the sun, and the source of all light is revealed. Therefore, let us lift our gaze from the temple to the presence that animates it, for only in that recognition does the light of Christ dawn in full clarity, now that we have seen the body's true role. Let us go on to consider the deeper symbol, the meaning of the single eye spoken by the Master, and how this single eye differs from the third eye the world pursues. Let us turn now to one of the most beautiful and most frequently misunderstood statements in all of Scripture. The Master said, "If thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light." And many, not understanding the mystical language in which he taught, have attempted to interpret this statement in terms of physical organs, physical vision, or psychic centers. Yet the Master spoke of none of these. The eye of which Jesus spoke is not a physical eye, not the left eye, not the right eye, and not a hidden third eye. It is not something that can be located within the skull, nor something that can be opened or closed by human effort. The eye in this teaching is spiritual discernment. the capacity to behold the one presence behind all appearances. When Jesus spoke of the single eye, he spoke of singleness of vision, the recognition that there is but one power, one life, one substance, one self. The eye becomes single when we no longer divide reality into God and matter, spirit and flesh, good and evil, health and disease, self and God. The eye becomes single when we behold only God as the reality of all that is. When the eye is single, when the consciousness beholds only God, the whole body is filled with light. What does this mean? It means that the outward expression of life, including the body, becomes harmonized by the recognition of the One, not because the body is the source of that light, but because the body reflects the consciousness controlling it. When the consciousness is single, the reflection is whole. Now let us see this deeply. The world reads Jesus' words through material sense and imagines he referred to a mystical eye in the forehead, and so the world attempts to open that eye, to stimulate it, to activate it, to awaken it. But this is not the way of the Master. For if illumination depended upon the body, then the blind could not be illumined, and the lame could not rise, and those with damaged organs would be exempt from grace. But Jesus proved the opposite. Illumination is of spirit, not of matter. The single eye is not a function of the body. It is the nature of consciousness, recognizing the one behind all forms. To behold with a single eye is to rest in the understanding that God is the only power. It is to stand unmoved before appearances because you are beholding the reality that lies behind them. It is to see through the illusion of separation and to perceive the light that fills all things. When you behold with the single eye, you are no longer impressed by the testimony of the senses. You no longer judge by what the eyes see or the ears hear. You no longer attempt to correct the outer world. Instead, you rest in the inner knowing that the invisible Christ is the only reality, and that all visible forms are but shadows of that truth. This is the eye. Jesus spoke of the eye that sees God everywhere. The fascination with the pineal gland arises because humanity senses that there is another way of seeing, something beyond the physical senses, but the mistake lies in assuming that this other seeing is accomplished by an organ. Spiritual seeing is not the work of an organ. It is the work of spirit. It is not achieved by opening something in the body. It is realized by opening the heart to the presence of God. Let me say it simply. The third eye is a concept of the world. The single eye is the revelation of spirit. The third eye is concerned with perception. The single eye is concerned with truth. The third eye seeks visions, insights, energies, impressions. The single eye seeks nothing, for it beholds God as all. And so, when Jesus spoke of the single eye, he did not prescribe a technique. He did not point to the forehead. He did not instruct in breath, posture, diet, or stimulation. He invited us into a new way of seeing, an inner vision born of the Spirit. This vision is not attained, it is received. It is not forced, it is revealed. It is not a power we develop. It is the presence of God shining through a consciousness that has surrendered its belief in two powers. A divided mind cannot behold the light. A mind that judges appearances cannot see the Christ. But when the mind becomes still, when the sense of a separate self dissolves, then the eye becomes single, and the light that has always been shines unobstructed This is what it means for the whole body to be filled with light. The body is no longer the center of attention. It becomes the instrument through which harmony flows. Light does not enter the body from a gland, it radiates from the indwelling presence. Now that we have seen what Jesus meant by the single eye, we may move deeper into the heart of the message. How awakening truly occurs, not through technique, not through effort, but through the gentle art of inner receptivity. And so let us continue. Let us now turn gently to that most sacred of questions. How does awakening truly occur? Not how the world imagines it, not how systems and techniques promise it, but how it has unfolded in the hearts of the mystics throughout all time, quietly, invisibly, effortlessly, as the activity of God within the soul. For in the spiritual life, nothing is more misunderstood than the nature of awakening. Humanity imagines it to be a breakthrough, a sudden surge of power, a flaming moment of illumination brought about by discipline or method or inner exertion. But this is not the way God reveals himself. The Spirit does not come by force, nor by effort, nor by the will of man. Awakening comes by grace. Let us sit quietly within ourselves for a moment and acknowledge all true revelation is God's work, not ours. The human mind cannot produce the light of spirit. The human will cannot drag the infinite into manifestation. The human self cannot climb into heaven by its own strength. Awakening begins when the human self grows still enough for the divine self to announce its presence. This is the essence of the Goldsmith method, not a method of doing, but a way of not doing, a way of resting, of listening, of opening the soul to the activity of the presence. It is the practice of becoming inwardly receptive until the still, small voice makes itself known. Let us see this deeply. When you sit in quietness, not asking, not demanding, not seeking to achieve anything, you create a space within consciousness in which God may speak. You move aside the busy chatter of thought and allow the infinite invisible to flow. Goldsmith called this the listening attitude, not the listening of ears, nor the listening of mind, but the listening of being, an inner posture of availability, of surrender, of humility before the presence that is already here. In this listening, 3 sacred movements take place. 1, silence, not a strained silence, not a forced stillness, but a gentle withdrawing of attention from the world of appearances. You do not fight thought. You do not chase quiet. You simply rest in the awareness that beneath every thought, every sensation, every concern, there is a presence untouched, unmoved, undivided. You come to this silence not to find God, but to let God find expression in you. 2, receptivity. In this quietness, the soul begins to soften. The walls of self-effort dissolve. There is no attempt to reach God, no desire to manipulate the moment. You sit as an open window, allowing the breeze to enter of its own accord. You are not waiting for experiences. You are waiting upon God. This waiting is not passive. It is alive, alert, expectant, not for some phenomenon, but for the inner assurance that spirit is present, even if no word is heard, even if no feeling arises. The soul knows that simply by resting in God, the work is already underway. 3, recognition, and then, in the midst of this sacred stillness, something begins to dawn, not always dramatically, not always with sensation, but quietly, like the first glimmer of morning light. you begin to sense, however faintly, that the presence is here. You begin to know, not intellectually, but in the depths of your being, that God is the life of you, the breath of you, the consciousness of you. You are no longer reaching outward. You are abiding inwardly. You are no longer calling to God. You are responding to God. You are no longer seeking illumination. Illumination is seeking you. This is awakening, not a sudden spark produced by human effort, but the gentle unfolding of a truth that has always been present. This process is not dramatic. It is not sensational. It is not accompanied by visions, energies, or ecstasies. It is often so subtle, so quiet, that it may go unnoticed until you realize that something within you has shifted, that your fears have loosened, your judgments softened, your sense of separation weakened. It happens the way seeds open beneath the soil, silently, invisibly, naturally. Awakening is not an event, it is a revealing. It is not a result, it is a recognition. It is not the discovery of something new, but the uncovering of what was always there. This is why no stimulation of the pineal gland can produce Christ consciousness. This is why no technique can force spiritual illumination. For Christ is not awakened by effort, it is awakened by the dissolution of effort. In quiet contemplation, in listening, in the soft surrender of the personal will, a space is created in which God can be God. And when God is allowed to be God, the soul awakens to its true identity. This, then, is the Goldsmith method. A, turning inward. A, listening. A, resting. A, recognition. A, surrender to the presence that has always been the life of your life. Now that we understand how awakening truly occurs, we may see clearly why the world's techniques, however sincere, can become obstacles on the spiritual path. And it is to this gentle discernment that we now turn. Let us continue gently now and enter into a deeper discernment, for this point is of great importance to the spiritual traveler. Many earnest seekers, moved by a sincere longing for God, have turned to techniques, practices, rituals, and exercises that they believe will bring them closer to the infinite. They believe that if they repeat a certain phrase, stimulate a certain energy, open a certain chakra, or activate a certain gland, they may succeed in touching the presence. This is not to criticize these practices. Every seeker walks the path according to his present understanding, but we must speak truthfully, lovingly, and clearly. The very search for God through technique can become the greatest obstacle to finding Him. Why? Because the moment we believe that something we do can bring about the realization of God, we have placed the human self at the center, and where the human self stands, God seems to stand apart. Let us see this with calm clarity. Techniques always begin with the assumption that I am separate from God, and through effort, I must bridge the gap. But Christ consciousness begins with the recognition that I and the Father are one, and no effort is needed to make what is eternally true become true. This is the fundamental distinction between the world's approach and the mystical approach. The world's way is effort. The spiritual way is surrender. The world's way is doing. The spiritual way is listening. The world's way is attaining. The spiritual way is recognizing. Techniques subtly whisper, if you do this long enough, hard enough, with enough discipline, you will reach God. But the Master said, the kingdom of God is within you. The kingdom is not reached. It is revealed. It is not built by practice. It is uncovered by grace. It is not earned. It is recognized. Let us understand the danger not in the practice itself, but in the belief behind it. 1. Techniques strengthen the personal sense of self. Every technique says, I must achieve something. I must bring about change. I must improve my consciousness. I must force awakening. This I, the one doing the work, is the very illusion that must dissolve before Christ can be realized. Techniques, therefore, unintentionally reinforce the sense of a personal self striving towards spiritual accomplishment, but there is no personal self in Christ consciousness. There is only God expressing. 2. Techniques seek effects instead of cause. When we use a technique to stimulate a gland, shift energy, or create an inner experience, we are working with effects, not with cause. We are manipulating the shadows instead of turning to the light. And as long as we occupy ourselves with shadows, the light remains unseen. The body cannot bring forth Christ. The mind cannot bring forth Christ. The emotions cannot bring forth Christ. Only Christ can reveal Christ. 3. Techniques create expectation and disappointment. Where there is a method, there is expectation. Where there is expectation, there is inevitable disappointment. Awakening cannot be scheduled. Grace arrives when there is no expectation, no striving, no personal will. 4. Techniques keep us seeking rather than realizing. The greatest hindrance on the path is perpetual seeking. For as long as we seek, we affirm that we lack, and consciousness cannot reveal abundance to one who insists upon lack. Christ consciousness is not found through trying. It is found through ceasing to try. Let us pause here, not to think, not to evaluate, simply to rest in the realization that God is present now, not because of anything we have done, but because God is the very life of our being. In this stillness, we begin to see why techniques can mislead even the sincere. They keep us outwardly occupied. They keep the mind busy. They give the ego a task. And as long as the ego is occupied, the soul cannot hear the whisper of the infinite. The mystic discovers that awakening comes only when all technique is laid aside, when all effort is surrendered, when all desire to experience God is released, and when we simply rest in the awareness of the one who is already here. When we drop the techniques, we do not lose the spiritual path. We lose only the sense that we are walking it alone. God was never waiting for us to activate a gland. God was waiting for us to be still. Now that we have understood how techniques distract from realization, we can move into the heart of the teaching. What truly activates Christ consciousness, not through effort, but through recognition, surrender, and the gentle unveiling of oneness. Let us continue. We now come to the heart of this message, the quiet center around which all spiritual truth revolves. For after we have laid aside technique, after we have released the belief that the body can bring forth God, after we have turned away from stimulation and effort, what remains? What is the true doorway into Christ consciousness? It is this recognition of oneness, not the idea of oneness, not the belief in oneness, not the affirmation of oneness, but the inner realization, gentle, silent, profound, that God is the only mind, the only substance, the only presence, the only self. Christ consciousness is the recognition that there is nothing separate from God, no power apart from God, no life apart from God, no mind apart from God, no self apart from God. This recognition does not come by force. It does not come by analysis or intellectual understanding. It comes by grace, as the fruit of quiet contemplation, as the natural unfolding of a soul that has ceased striving and has begun to listen. Let us sit quietly in this truth. Christ consciousness is not something to be attained. It is something to be remembered. It is not a state we reach. It is the state we are. What then is the true activation? It is not the awakening of a gland. It is the awakening from the belief that we are something other than God's expression. It is the dissolving of the sense of separation, the falling away of the belief that there is a me here and a God somewhere else. Christ consciousness dawns the moment we recognize that there is only God, being all that we see, all that we feel, all that we are. If this realization seems immense, let us simplify it. The true activation occurs when we withdraw our attention from appearances and rest in the invisible. When we look at our problems and say, there is only one presence here. When we look at our bodies and say, there is only one life here. When we look at our minds and say, there is only one intelligence here. Not as a technique, not to change anything, but as recognition. Recognition alone is the key. If you have ever watched a fog lift from the sea, you will understand. The ocean does not change. The land does not change. Only the fog dissolves, revealing what was present all along. The light did not come. It was uncovered. So it is in spiritual realization. When we recognize oneness, the fog of separation dissolves. We see what has always been true. Let us see how this applies to the pineal gland. The moment we believe that the gland must be activated, we are affirming separation. We are saying, consciously or unconsciously, God is not fully present yet. Something must change before I can know him. This belief is the fog. The fog is not wrong. It is simply unnecessary. But when we recognize that the life within us is already divine, already whole, already complete, the fog lifts, not because we have forced it, but because we have ceased reinforcing it. This is why the mystics have always returned to stillness, to silence, to contemplation. For in silence there is no technique, no effort, no manipulation, only recognition, and recognition is the gateway through which grace flows. Let us now speak of a simple practice, not a technique, but a posture of the soul that aligns with the infinite way. Sit quietly for a moment, not to achieve anything, but to notice. Let your thoughts come and go. Do not resist them. They are not obstacles. Gently turn your attention to the invisible presence within, not with strain, not with desire, but with the calm assurance that God is already here. Rest in the recognition, I and the Father are one. I live, yet not I. The Christ liveth in me. This presence is my true identity. You are not trying to awaken the Christ. You are acknowledging that Christ is already awakened as your very being. This recognition, soft, quiet, without drama, is the activation. It frees you from the belief that God is elsewhere. It dissolves the illusion that you must do something to reach him. And it reveals the truth that the infinite invisible is already expressing itself through you. The realization may come gently, subtly, without sensation, but do not be deceived by the simplicity. This quiet recognition is the most powerful spiritual movement in the universe. For the moment you recognize oneness, The Christ begins to shine through your consciousness without obstruction. Peace flows, clarity comes, fear dissolves. Harmony appears not because you have willed it, but because you have stepped aside and allowed God to be God. This is the true activation. This is the true awakening. This is Christ revealed. Now, having reached this heart of hearts, we are prepared to bring our journey to completion with a closing reflection on resting in the ever-present Christ. And now let us come to the quiet close of this journey, not an ending, for the Spirit has no endings, but a settling, a sinking down into the stillness from which revelation arises. Everything we have explored, everything we have touched, everything we have recognized leads us to this simple, sacred truth. Christ is ever present. Christ is ever active. Christ is ever expressing itself as your very being. We have walked through the illusions, the belief that the body can open the gates of heaven, the belief that effort can compel the infinite, the belief that techniques can awaken what God already is, and gently, tenderly, these illusions have fallen away. Now, only the simplicity remains, only the purity remains, only the stillness remains. Let us rest in that, for in the end, the spiritual life is not a climb, nor a struggle, nor a search. It is an awakening to what already is. The kingdom is not attained, it is recognized. Christ is not reached, Christ is revealed, God is not summoned, God is acknowledged. Therefore, we leave this teaching not with more knowledge, but with less striving, not with more techniques, but with fewer, not with an agenda for awakening, but with a quiet confidence that awakening is already unfolding eternally within our very midst. Let us rest in the assurance that there is no place where God is not. There is no moment when Christ is absent. There is no circumstance untouched by the infinite. There is no self apart from the self of God. As we leave this contemplation, let us enter a deeper silence, not the silence of shutting out the world, but the silence of resting in God while the world moves around us. Wherever you go after this moment, into your home, your work, your relationships, your quiet hours, go with this awareness. You do not carry Christ. Christ carries you. You do not maintain the presence. The presence maintains you. You do not seek God. God expresses as you. You do not need to remember the truth. The truth remembers you in every breath. Christ lives you. In every beat of the heart, Christ sustains you. In every thought that rises from peace, Christ informs you. In every act of love, Christ expresses through you. And so, as we close, let us gently release all effort, even the effort to be spiritual, and let us simply be. Let us allow the infinite, invisible to have its way, to live its life, to express its nature, to shine its light. Sit for one moment longer in this recognition. The Christ that Jesus revealed is the Christ that you are, not by attainment, but by divine inheritance. In this recognition, spiritual striving ends. In this recognition, separation dissolves. In this recognition, life becomes grace. In this recognition, the pineal gland, the body, the mind all fall into their rightful place as instruments, never the source. And the source, eternal and radiant, begins to shine without obstruction. Let us go now in peace not to seek the presence, but to rest in it, not to call upon Christ, but to live as its expression, not to activate the divine, but to allow the divine to reveal itself in its own perfect way, in its own perfect time, through its own perfect grace. And so we rest in the ever-present Christ, in the infinite, invisible, in the truth that was always here and will always remain. Amen.